And we're talking about our words and how to use the power of our spoken words. And what we learn about that is our words can bring life to people. Just as a quick example, I remember once I used to go to Starbucks in one of the towns where Bonnie and I lived and served, and there was a barista there who, he was into goth. Do you remember when goth everybody was wearing black? I mean, they even wore black clothes. Eminem used to be a rapper, and he wore all black, you know. And these goth people, they even added chains and metal and stuff. And this guy was total goth at Starbucks. And he would make my drink every day. I went in there once a day, and he'd slide it across the counter to me. He was the one that handed them out. And when he would slide them across, I would look in his eyes. And all of your eyes are very similar. You have a really dark part in the middle and some white stuff around it, right? That's what our eyes look like. His eyes weren't white. His eyes, when I first met him, the white part was yellow. The longer I knew him, the white part was turning orange, like a pumpkin. What does that mean? We have any nurses, pre-med people? What is going on? Liver failure. The buildup, the filtration system of the blood was not working because he was overloading his liver with drugs and alcohol and who knows what else. Well, it's Starbucks. Happened to be the busiest Starbucks in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There were always 20 to 30 people in line. They had a little system where you walked like this, you know, to get your coffee. You kept waiting in line and going through that snake line. And I said, Lord, this guy is dying. And I want an opportunity to share the gospel with him. So I made a deal. I don't suggest this, but I did it. I said, Lord, if I ever get in line at Starbucks and there ever comes a time no one is behind me, so I'm not holding up the show. You know what I mean? Because they're paying him $20 an hour to make coffee. If no one's behind me, I'm going to share the gospel with that guy. I could see his name tag. Daniel. Black chains. He had everything goth. And orange eyes. And one day, I don't know how long it was later, I was in the line, not paying any attention. I paid for it, gave my order. I walked down to the end, and as I walked down to the counter to wait for my drink, I went, there was no one. You know, I was on my phone like everybody. I didn't notice no one was behind me. I went, this is my moment. And so Daniel he made my drink, and he started sliding it across the counter to me. And I looked right into his orange eyes, and I said, and I pulled out my tract out of my wallet, and I said, Daniel, has anyone ever shared the gospel with you? And his orange eyes got a little wider. Gospel? I'd never heard him talk. He didn't know I knew his name. Most people forget they're wearing a name tag. And he went, what? And I said, Daniel, and people were just starting to come into line. I knew I had 15, 20 seconds. I said, Daniel, someday you're going to wake up, and when you wake up, you're going to be in hell. That his orange eyes got this big around. I don't think anybody had ever said anything like that directly to him. And I said, this is the gospel from the Bible about how Jesus Christ died for your sins. And I slid, I said all that as he was sliding my Starbucks cup across to me. I was sliding my tract across to him. That was it. The line filled up. I went over and sat and studied. I wrote his name down, Daniel. I prayed for him. The next day I wanted to follow up. Daniel wasn't there. I thought, he had a day off. So the next day I came back. He wasn't there. A week later, he wasn't there. So finally I went to the front counter as I was ordering. I said, where's Daniel? And the lady looked at me. She said, that's what all of us are asking. Where's Daniel? It was like, where's Waldo? I said, what do you mean? She said, well, last week on Thursday, which happened to be the day that I talked to him, she said, he walked out of work and has never come back. I said, what? She said, he turned around on Thursday and walked out the back door and has never come back to work. I said, that's curious. So I went back to studying. And I prayed for him. I thought maybe he died of an overdose. You know what I mean? 6 months later. Now remember, I told you he wore black rivets, boots, chains. When he walked, you could hear the chains hitting the metal. I mean, he was into this goth stuff and heavy metal and all that. I was sitting in my corner where I was editing my dissertation at Dallas Seminary, which I did every day there, and I was working on it. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I saw black. You see a lot of black. So I just kept working, and the black kept getting closer and closer. And then I noticed chains. And then I noticed metal rivets all the way down. And I noticed metal on the boots. And my eyes went like this. And I saw the black M&M hat. And I saw 2 eyes looking at me. And he stood right at my table and he said, "There you are. I've been looking for you for a long time." His eyes were pure white. He said, do you remember me? I said, "Daniel, I pray for you." He said, "Do you remember sliding that track across to me and saying about 20 or 30 words to me?" I said, "Oh, I sure do." He said, "You scared the hell out of me." That was his words. He said, "No one told me about hell, that I was going to die and go to hell." And he said, "Then you gave me that paper and you didn't take time to explain it to me." He said, "You didn't explain that paper to me." So he said, I walked right out the back door, and he said, I started walking down the street of Tulsa, and he said, I took my little paper you gave me with me, and I went, "Have you ever gotten one of these? Do you understand?" "You don't?" "Well, have you ever gotten one of these? Do you understand?" And he said, I walked down the street of Tulsa asking everybody I met if they understood this gospel plan. He said, until I found a place that did. And it was a storefront church, a church plant. It was called Guts, G-U-T-S, where all of them look like Daniel, and they just lift weights and have music blaring, and they all are wearing chains. It was a outreach to those kind of people. And they said, "Yeah, come in, we understand that." And they led him to the Lord. And he told me, my whole life has changed. He said, "Do you see my eyes?" He said, "I was overdosing, I was dying." He says, "They invited me to join their band." He said, "We're on tour now." And he said, "I'm in a heavy metal, something, rock band." And he said, "It always stops at the middle. And they turn out all the lights, put the spotlight on." And he says, "I come out and I tell the story about the guy that scared the hell out of me, and I share the gospel." Do you know what? Do you know how powerful your words can be? Do you think I thought that saying, "You better watch out, you're going to wake up in hell, you should read this tract"? I didn't think anything was going to happen. I thought he was going to wad it up and throw it up. Have you ever been resisted when you share the gospel? That's what I was expecting. God says, speak life into people. Share my word, share the gospel, and it won't be, you won't comprehend all that God can do.